My name is Elena Vargas and I just turned 18. Last night at my birthday party my father pulled me aside and whispered in my ear, Elena, when this is over you are going to sign some papers for your uncle Sebastian. I smiled and nodded so no one would suspect anything. But as soon as I could I walked to the kitchen, opened my laptop, and quietly transferred my entire multimillion-dollar inheritance, left by my grandparents, into an irrevocable trust. I did it as a simple precaution, though deep down I knew it was necessary. The next morning my parents and my younger sister discovered the truth. The cabin, the savings, the investments, everything was now locked behind a legal wall they could not touch. My father turned pale, losing all color in his face in a single second. My uncle Sebastian, who had already closed a deal to sell a property that never belonged to him, called a lawyer in panic. Before I tell you what happened next, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Leave in the comments which city you are watching from and what time it is there. I love knowing where you are listening from. Now let me take you 6 years back to a summer at Cedar Lake, when my grandfather said something I did not fully understand until last night. The summer I turned 12, my grandfather Victor Castillo picked me up in his truck and drove me to Cedar Lake, about 40 minutes from home. The family cabin is surrounded by tall white pines that block the afternoon sun. The porch leans slightly to one side and the screen door never closes properly. It smells of wood smoke, old books, and something sweet I have never quite identified. That morning my grandfather asked for my help to lift a fence rail. We spent hours replacing 3 rotten posts. He never rushed me. Instead, he taught me to check the wood by pressing my thumb into the grain. If it gives, then it is no longer good, he would say. Inside, my grandmother Carmen waited with iced tea and sandwiches on the kitchen table, the same table my grandfather built with his own hands the year they married. That afternoon, while watching the lake turn golden, my grandfather told me something that stayed engraved in my mind. This cabin stays in the family, Elena, but family is not always blood. Family is who shows up when you need them. At 12 years old, I thought he was being poetic. He was not. Throughout that summer, I returned to Cedar Lake every weekend. I learned where the water heater dripped, which window stuck, and how to bleed the radiator. In October, my grandmother taught me to organize the books by color, so the room felt warmer. My grandfather showed me the property lines marked with iron stakes. He had driven himself. What I did not know at the time was that my grandfather was already speaking with a lawyer about that place, and specifically about me. When I returned home, the atmosphere was different. Our house in the city was fine, I suppose. 3 bedrooms, a garden that always needed trimming, and a garage my father used as an office for his construction materials store. But it was not a warm home, it was just a house. My sister Valeria, who is 2 years younger, had the biggest room, redecorated with lavender walls and a desk lamp that cost more than my entire bookshelf. My room still had the old carpet from the previous owners. One night during dinner, my father brought up the cabin. That old place is just sitting there losing value, said Don Javier Castillo, while cutting his meat. The property taxes are killing us. We should sell it and reinvest the money. My mother nodded without hesitation. It makes sense, she added. I spoke up. Grandfather said the cabin stays in the family. My father let out a laugh, but it was not joyful, it was dismissive. You were 12, Elena. He was just being nice to you. No one asked me anything else. The conversation quickly moved to Valeria's debate trophy. She was a regional finalist, something very impressive to them. My mother had already framed the certificate. I had won the district science fair 2 weeks earlier, but the ribbon was still forgotten in my backpack. After dinner, while clearing the plates, I saw a glossy brochure, half hidden under the grocery list. Richline Development, Lakefront Lots, premium prices. On the margin, a phone number was handwritten. It was not my father's handwriting. I left the brochure exactly where I found it and went up to my room. I sat on the bed and thought about my grandfather's kitchen table, the one he built with his own hands. I thought about how someone was already measuring my grandparents' home with dollar signs. Grandfather Victor passed away 2 years later. I was 14. The funeral was a grey Tuesday under light rain. At the reception, I noticed my father and his brother Sebastian talking in low voices near the dessert table. Sebastian had a folder under his arm. I heard him say, "We need to move on this before the probate process gets complicated." They were talking about selling the cabin at their own father's funeral. I said nothing. I was 14. I had no power or voice. 2 more years passed. I was 16 when grandmother Carmen fell ill in March and left us in June. The last time I visited her, she took my hand with surprising strength. "The cabin is yours, Elena. Do not let them take it. Promise me." I promised. She squeezed my hand one last time and closed her eyes. That same night after the funeral, I heard my father on the phone in the garage. His voice sounded light, almost relieved. "Yes, I agree. Let's get it started." I realized something that felt like a stone in my chest. My grandmother's death was not a loss for them, it was a sales opportunity. Between 16 and 18, the cabin became my silent rebellion. Every Saturday I drove to the lake in the used car I bought with my babysitting money. I repaired the porch, cleaned the gutters, and cared for the place. Exactly as my grandfather taught me. At home, the cabin was no longer grandfather's place. Now they called it the family property. One November day, while cleaning the hallway closet in the cabin, I found a sealed envelope in grandmother Carmen's handwriting. It had my name on it. Inside was a business card: Margaret Caldwell, Family Trust Attorney. My hands trembled. My grandmother knew I would be the only one cleaning those closets. Not my father, not my Uncle Sebastian. I kept the card in my wallet and waited. 3 months before I turned 18, Margaret Caldwell called me. "Elena, I need to speak with you before your birthday. There are things you need to know, and we do not have much time." We met in her office. Margaret explained that my grandparents had set up an irrevocable trust 6 years earlier. The cabin, a savings account, and an investment portfolio, totaling about $2.1 million, were in my name. I was the sole beneficiary. Legally, this never entered the direct estate, Margaret explained. It does not go through probate. Your father and Uncle Sebastian have no legal rights to these assets. She also warned me that someone had been asking questions at the county recorder's office about the cabin title. A few days later, I overheard my Uncle Sebastian talking with my father in the garage. "I already signed the purchase agreement with Richline for $450,000, said Sebastian. "But we need a clean title. We will do a quitclaim deed, register it, and sell. Elena is 17, she cannot do anything. By the time she turns 18, the deal will be closed. We will give her about $50,000 for college, and she should be grateful." My Uncle Sebastian had signed a sales contract for a property that was not his, based on a lie. That night I wrote to the lawyer, "They are speeding up the plans." She replied immediately, "Come see me on Saturday. We will prepare everything." The plan was simple but precise. The moment I turned 18, I would become a legal adult and could formally accept my role as successor beneficiary. Margaret would file a legal notice of interest at the recorder's office first thing Monday, freezing any transfer attempt. 5 days before my birthday, my mother tried to manipulate me. "Elena, now that you are becoming an adult, we must make family decisions. The cabin costs a lot to maintain. Your father is going through a difficult time with his business. If we sell, we can pay the debts and secure college for you and Valeria." I repeated that grandmother wanted me to keep it, but she only responded coldly, "Feelings do not pay the taxes, Elena." My father entered the room and added, "I already spoke with a buyer. A development group called Richline. It is a good deal." I only said I would think about it. 3 days before my birthday, Uncle Sebastian intercepted me at the house entrance. With his real estate agent smile, he offered me the $50,000 in cash. "Elena, it is a lot of money for someone your age. Most kids would jump for joy." I asked, "Whose name is on the deed, Uncle Sebastian?" His smile froze for a second before he said, "Your grandparents. But since they are gone, it passes to your father and me as closest relatives." He knew that was a lie, but he counted on me being an ignorant girl. The night before my birthday, I went alone to the cabin. The air smelled of rain and pines. I reviewed the documents Margaret sent me by email. At midnight I cried. It was not a breakdown but a silent release. I cried because I wished my father had been the kind of man who would take me fishing instead of calculating the lake's resale value. I cried because I wished my mother had asked what I wanted, instead of telling me what was practical. But wishes do not work in courtrooms. Documents do. At 11:50 p.m. I joined a video call with Margaret. Just as the clock struck midnight and I became an adult, I signed the papers. In that instant, any decision about the trust assets passed through me. What I did not know was that at the same time, in another part of the city, my Uncle Sebastian was printing a fake deed. They planned to register it at 9 in the morning. My father even asked if he was sure it was legal. And Sebastian replied, "We are the closest relatives, Greg. It is simple. But it was not simple, it was fraud. My birthday party started at 4 in the afternoon the next day. There were balloons, cake, and about 20 guests. My father stood up to give a toast. We are very proud of Elena, and as a family we have exciting plans for the future. We are going to sell the Cedar Lake cabin to secure everyone's future. Elena understands, right, sweetheart? The whole room fell silent looking at me. Neighbors, friends, and my sister Valeria waited for my answer. My mother smiled and added, "It is what responsible families do. We sacrifice for each other." I placed the fork on my plate. The metallic sound echoed through the entire room. "I never agreed to sell the cabin, Dad," I said with a firm voice. My father's smile disappeared. "She is joking," he told the guests. "It is the birthday nerves." But I continued. "I am not joking, and Uncle Sebastian knows it. The time to talk about this was last night. Tomorrow at 8 in the morning everything will become clear." The guests started leaving shortly after. They could feel the storm coming. When only we remained, my mother exploded. "Do you have any idea what your father is going through? We could lose this house. You are selfish for holding onto that cabin." Then she added something that left me frozen. "Sebastian found that lawyer's card in your bag, Elena. Who is Margaret Caldwell?" They had been going through my personal things. My father declared, "Tomorrow we go to the recorder's office. We will sell the cabin and you will get your share. If you fight this, you are on your own. Forget college help and forget living under this roof." They were threatening to kick me out on my 18th birthday. "I am part of this family, Dad," I replied. "I am the part that keeps its promises." I went up to my room and closed the door. At 8 in the morning on Monday, Margaret Caldwell was the first person to enter the recorder's office. She presented the trust and the legal notice of interest. At 8:14 she called me. "It is done, Elena. The property is protected." At 9 my father and Uncle Sebastian arrived at the same office, very confident. Sebastian slid his fake deed across the counter. The clerk checked the system and stopped. "I cannot register this document," she said dryly. "The property has been under a trust since 2020. And there is a legal notice filed this morning by attorney Margaret Caldwell." Sebastian turned pale. My father, confused, shouted that there was no trust. But the chain of title was clear. Margaret, who was sitting in the waiting room, watched them leave defeated. Without saying a single word. My father called me at 9:22. He was furious. "What did you do? You went behind our backs with a lawyer." I answered calmly. "I accepted what grandfather and grandmother left me. They did not leave it to you because they knew you would sell it." Before the flowers on their funeral had even wilted. He hung up without goodbye. Shortly after he received another call. It was from the Richline Development representative. He was very upset. "We have a purchase agreement with your uncle. He guaranteed a clean title." I explained the truth. My uncle was never the owner. The representative asked if the property was for sale and I said no. "Then we will take legal action against Mr. Castillo," he said. Not only was my uncle facing a civil lawsuit for breach of contract and a $45,000 penalty, but he was also under investigation for forging a notary seal on the deed he tried to present. That was a serious offense. That afternoon my father came home devastated. He sat at the table and confessed the truth. "I am going to lose this house, Elena. I owe the bank a large amount. The store went bankrupt. The cabin was our only way out." My mother insisted that my grandparents were not thinking clearly at the end of their lives. But I had Margaret on speakerphone. She intervened with her professional voice. "Mr. Castillo, this trust was established 6 years before your parents passed. Challenging it will cost you more in legal fees than the property is worth. You have no chance." The silence in the kitchen was heavy. For the first time I saw something different in my father's eyes. It was not anger, it was the recognition that he had lost. In the following weeks the pieces started falling. Uncle Sebastian lost his real estate license and had to take a personal loan to pay the penalty to the developer. My father had to sell his store at a loss to negotiate with the bank. My mother returned to work at a pharmacy after 10 years. The house was saved, but their savings disappeared. In town the story spread quickly. The sons of Victor Castillo tried to take the cabin, and their granddaughter stopped them. Some thought I was brave, others thought I was cold. I did not care. One Saturday in April I drove to the cabin. The place smelled the same of pine books and that sweet something. I found a letter from grandfather Victor in a drawer. It said he knew his sons would try to sell the place. He did not blame them but said my father never understood the difference between something that has a price and something that has value. He asked me to take care of the place because the place had taken care of me first. Margaret called me with one last surprise. My grandparents had left a separate education fund of $50,000 for my studies, which with interest now exceeded $58,000. It was exactly the same amount my father and uncle had offered me as a bribe to let them sell the cabin. My grandparents had planned everything. I enrolled in university to study environmental and forest sciences. The university is 20 minutes from the cabin. When I filled out the housing forms, I wrote the cabin address as my permanent residence. At last I felt I was home. I met my parents at a neutral cafe. I told them I loved them but the cabin would never be for sale. I set one condition. If they wanted a relationship with me, it must be based on respect and honesty, not on money or guilt. My father nodded silently. It is the most I can expect for now, and that is enough for me. My sister Valeria came to visit me one Sunday. We ate pizza on the porch and watched a heron on the lake. She apologized. She knew nothing about what my parents were planning. She asked if she could visit again, and I told her she would always be welcome. The cabin not only protected a property, it created a space for something new to begin between us. Today is a June morning and I am on the porch watching the mist rise over the lake. I do not feel that I won against my family. There are no trophies when the people who should protect you are the ones who hurt you. But I kept a promise. My grandparents could not change who their children were, but they made sure I had solid ground to stand on. Sometimes the people who protect you are not the ones in front of you today. Sometimes they are people who planned your well-being years ago in silence. And sometimes all you have to do is show up, sign the paper, and keep the promise. Peace does not come from revenge. It comes from knowing you are building your life on something solid. This is my story. If it made you feel something, anger, relief, or hope, then it fulfilled its purpose. Now I have a question for you. If you could protect only one thing in your life, a place, a person, or a promise, what would it be? Tell me in the comments. I read them all. And if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. If you have not subscribed yet, I would love to have you here for the next story. Until next time. Thank you for listening to today's story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. See you in the next story.